Hi there, glad you can join us. It's Robert here, representing both La Trobe University and Escape Room Education. And today we'll be talking about educational escape rooms for inescapable learning. And at the end of the day, that's what we want to do. We want to make learning inescapable and solve this age-old problem that not everyone's engaged in the classroom at the same time. Sometimes it might be half the class, sometimes it might be more. And there's many reasons behind this lack of engagement or motivation to learn. Now, they range from things that we can control as educators, what we're teaching and how we're teaching and the temperature of the room and things like that, to things we can't directly control as educators. The things that might be the time of day, what's going on in the students' lives, other distractions that might be going on in the classroom that we have little control over. All sorts of things like that, everything from their home life to the boyfriends and girlfriends. All of those things we don't necessarily have very much control over at all. But some things we do, and that's a domain that we can actually make a difference in and actually have some really positive impact in getting students motivated to learn. Well, you've probably seen this graph here that shows a number of different learning methodologies and ways we can learn and how much retention that we have over time with that. Now, there's been a lot of dispute over the actual percentages and things like that. But I think we intrinsically know that if we just read through something and don't pay that much attention to it, we'll forget a lot of that after days or even weeks, what it's talking about here. But if we actually have to sit down, nut things out, hands-on, do something creative, problem-solving, hands-on, we'll tend to retain a lot more of that over time. And these educational escape rooms that we're talking about fit nicely into this bottom area here, where students will retain things over time because they've been nutting them out, solving them together. Well, what are escape rooms then? I've used this term educational escape rooms. Escape rooms are a worldwide game-based activity. So they've been around since about 2007, originated out of Japan. And basically the idea is a big puzzle hunt activity that they've had in university campuses across the US for many years. But rather than doing it across a weekend, across a whole university campus and things, you compress it down to one or a number of small rooms and a small group of people over the period of maybe an hour. And that tends to be about the sweet spot there. And the idea is that you're locked in this room, normally not locked just for safety reasons, and you need to search for a way out. So you work as a team, you look for clues, you unlock locks. They might be key locks, normally combination locks of one kind or another. Might be electronic locks and things there. And you work together and solve all those locks. These activities are great for teamwork activities. They're fun activities, great for encouraging problem solving and divergent thinking and things like that. But how then do we apply this to the classroom? Well, first off, most of us don't have a whole lot of little rooms that we can lock students into, and they may not want to be locked into a whole lot of little rooms anyway. So the way that we actually do it is we use the term tabletop escape rooms. So rather than locking students in rooms and having all these rooms that we need to book out and set up and reset up each time a group does them, we do them on tables, hence the term tabletop escape rooms. So rather than the clues being spread around the room, they're in a series of sealed envelopes. So the students need to rip open the next envelope to look at the clues, solve the clues. Once they've solved those particular clues, they can rip open the next envelope and continue on like that. Now, we find that having done this with over 1,000 students, groups of 3 to 5 students tend to work best. If it gets any more than that, you start getting students not actually taking part and being spectators rather than being actively involved. And we actually want students to be involved and actually engaging strongly with the activity. Two other things. The answers need to be numeric, at least the way we set up these escape rooms, and there needs to be one correct answer. It's a bit mean if there's 5 different answers for it and they just need to guess which one it happens to be without any guidance, any problem-solving guidance to which one that particular one is. We also need to tell the students somehow, validate for them if they've got the correct answer or not. And there's several ways you can do it. Some are more fun than others. But before we look at those in detail, let's answer the bigger question that I often get when I write papers on this, and we've written a lot of papers on this in the academic journals. Are these things really escape rooms? After all, you're not locked in a room like a traditional escape room. And I think it's pretty clear that we can make a good case that they are. If you have a look around, there's lots, particularly in COVID times, of online escape rooms where you're not locked in a room, be it your bedroom or an online room or anything else. There's also lots of board games or tabletop games like these ones, which don't aim to actually teach you anything. They're just fun experiences you can join together. And those are all termed escape rooms. And there's even one there, the escape room, the game one, which has a decoder there that you're putting clues in and using to try and solve problems, and it validates your solutions as well. Having discussed COVID, it leads to the question of, should these be done in person or online? Now, we've actually done a fair bit of research in this, and we've run them both ways. Particularly in COVID restrictions and things like that, we've transitioned to running several of them online. And the feedback from the students, because we always get feedback from our students, they've certainly enjoyed them, and they've enjoyed something different than what they're being taught normally, a different teaching style. But there's a few caveats behind there. They are less engaging. It's more difficult for the students to actually communicate with each other. We've compared the test scores for students that did them in person and did them online, and the satisfaction's gone down from like 95% to 85%. So it's not a huge drop. The students aren't hating it, but they are finding it a bit more difficult, a bit less engaging, and they tend to get stuck a little bit more. One of the interesting things was, particularly when they're doing them remotely and they connect via Zoom and things to do them, is there were some students that just didn't participate. And unfortunately, that was the case. They turned off their web cameras, they just didn't participate and wanted to see what happened but didn't want to take part. Whereas when they're sitting around the table, the social pressure that is exerted there means that they actually do take part and do try and solve the problems as a team and things like that. The other thing is we found students would take, on average, about 20% longer to do them online compared to face-to-face, which might be explained by some of the communication difficulties and things like that. And it's just a lot easier for them to actually see and describe ideas to each other when they're sitting right next to each other. Now, there's lots of ways that you can build online escape rooms. We created our own interface, and we'll give you a chance to see that later on. There's Escape Room Maker, the most common one, and you'll see lots of tutorials on the web on how to do this using Google Forms. Lots of escape rooms in that form. What do we prefer? Well, it might be easier to run them online during these COVID times, but for actual taking part in the escape rooms, we much prefer being in the escape rooms and seeing the students enjoy those escape rooms in person. The experience is a better experience, but you do what you can with what you're given, I guess. Which brings us to, well, how do we do that validation in person? And what we've done is we've designed this. It's the world's first reconfigurable electronic escape room decoder box. What does that mean? Well, basically it gives us a chance to validate the participant answers. When they think they've got an answer, they can type it in there and it'll tell them if they're right or not. It doesn't just do that though. It allows you to reconfigure it to any code you want, between 1 and 8 digits long, and have 3 rounds of those codes. So round 1, round 2, round 3, each lining up with one of those particular envelopes. It gives them clues, so it tells them every 5 minutes when they've been stuck, it tells them what the next digit is and tells them how many digits they need to solve. You can assign penalties. We did this because when we first ran this, the very first time we ran it with staff, and they were very quick to work out maybe 3 of the 4 digits, and then someone would really quickly try and type in all the possible combinations to solve the last digit. So we wanted to actually have the option there to turn on penalties, so they actually need to solve it, not just brute force attack and try and work out what the solution is. And it's also got a countdown timer, which you can set from anything from 1 minute, which would be way too short, to 99 minutes. So a whole lot of scope there for changing it around. And there's a journal paper just over here that describes in detail how it works and what's inside it and everything about that. Now, one of the other things on the market is the Breakout EDU escape rooms. And I thought it's useful to actually compare the two. Our one uses an electronic decoder, so it keeps time electronically, it tells you the answers, it counts down. It's really quick to reconfigure. It takes seconds to actually reprogram one of these with a brand new set of solutions. The Breakout EDU ones, where they have a really nice kinesthetic aspect to it, that you're dealing with real locks, combination locks or key locks and things like that. The issue is it takes a long time to set up a whole bunch of these for a classroom. Changing the codes on each of these locks and making sure you've got them all right and things like that is a bit of a time-consuming process. And the locks wear out over time. Now, I've been in escape rooms where the locks have been wearing out and I've put in the right answer, but it didn't open. It's just wear and tear that happens with these physical sort of devices. So we like to think that the electronic decoder box solves a lot of those issues, and it actually gives you a whole lot of extra things like the built-in timer and also built-in data analytics. So what the students don't see is every time they make a mistake, it records it and tells you how many mistakes they've made for each round, and also keeps a tally of how long they've taken for each round. So as you go back later on and you're refining your problems, you can see which student or which groups had the most problem with which puzzles, how long it took them, and which puzzles might need to be a bit harder, which puzzles might need to be a little bit easier. All of those things are possible there for you. Well, how do you get one of these decoder boxes? There's 3 different options available. There's actually 2 different decoder boxes. So the 3rd generation one, the one at the top, which is in a nice waterproof case, that one, which has all the data analytics and things in it, that's our current model. That particular one, you can purchase it retail, fully assembled for $149. It's on the website that's listed there, escaperoomeducation.com. We also sell it in kit form. Some teachers have the skills of soldering and assembly and things like that. They might want to build it themselves and probably take you an hour to put it together if you're skilled at soldering and those sort of skills. The previous model is also available. So the previous one is a 3D printed one. So you 3D print the case yourself. You'll need access to 3D printing and laser cutting facilities, and once again all those assembly facilities. We've made this completely free and available open source online, and the link for Instructables is there as well. We also have published recently a book, Inescapable Learning, and this book basically walks you through how to use a decoder, but also how to create your own escape rooms, and has some samples there of escape rooms that you could directly use in your classroom, and ones that we've actually used with students. Everything from high school ones right up through to tertiary ones. Now we've got a little bonus there, so if you put in the discount code, you'll get a bit of a discount off the Escape Room Decoder Box and the book and whatever purchase you make. So, a few enhancements from the 3rd generation that we put in the 3rd generation one that weren't in the 2nd generation one. We made them USB rechargeable, so the 2nd generation one just used AAA batteries. We made them a whole lot more robust, so waterproof, shockproof case, lot less likely to have any issues with the wiring or anything like that. We built that data analytics there and built this really nice easy GUI that you can use to program your devices and program those different codes in there. You can see that it's just a matter of typing what numbers, what answers you want for each one, and how long you want the escape room to be, whether you want a penalty associated with putting in the wrong guess. You press go and it sends it to the device and you program it. That's how it's done. Quite straightforward and simple. We also added a few bonuses in there because we realized that a device like this has a huge amount of applicability in different areas. So one of them was we put a whole lot of number factorials in there. So if you hold down the button 1, for example, when you turn it on, it goes through addition number facts. So your students have 2 minutes to answer as many addition puzzles they can get through, and at the end it tells you how many they got right and how many they got wrong. And we've got subtraction ones, multiplication ones, doubling ones, a whole different range of different ones there to test out their knowledge in number facts. Now we've seen this used with students, and we use it with students at the lower primary sort of level, and they love it, and they keep a leaderboard and try and get better each day, try and get more in, and they work on which one they're struggling with a bit more and try and get a higher number right and lower number wrong there. We also put a few games in there of guess the number type logical puzzles where they need to use deductive reasoning, where they need to guess a 3-digit or a 4-digit number, and when they give a guess, it will tell you how many you've got right, how many you've got wrong, and how many are in the correct order but not which ones. And you need to answer, do a whole lot of guesses and try and narrow down to what the correct numbers are and what order they need to be in. We also built in an ad hoc sort of short escape room scenario that requires no computer, no plugging it in. Basically, you turn it on, put the code in, and it's ready to go, ready for the students to use. So really quick in the classroom. If you just want to say, okay, here's a quick escape room, here's a puzzle, we'll do it in this format. You turn it on, put in the puzzle, away you go, you've got 15 minutes to solve it. One question we actually get a lot is, well, can't you just do that online? Can't you do that in an app? And this is actually the first reaction we often get before people have done the activity. Once they've done the activity, though, we see the tune changes a fair bit. They tell us things like, we're so glad it wasn't an app. We're so glad there was something real hardware, something physical that wasn't abstracted. It was something they could use and not be distracted by apps and other things that are going on and batteries going flat and all those sort of things. It levels the playing field nicely because everyone's got the same set of hardware, and it themes it as well because you've got this key to turn it on, you've got this countdown timer, it's all going really nicely. It's something a bit different, and participants have told us they really like that aspect of it. Well, one thing that we often do in escape rooms is we want some sort of a theme to be around it, to make it fun and immersive, because after all, if we're going down this gamification route or game-based learning route, we need a game. And so just like any good game has a storyline, we want to create a storyline around our escape rooms. Now, we've written a whole bunch of different storylines. Some of them are in the book that you can just use directly in your escape room. But really, this comes down to your imagination. And it's actually a lot of fun writing these things. So we've done everything from earthquake cave-ins, Cold War bunkers. There's bomb diffuser ones. We've had a Star Wars one in the past. You could be trapped in a museum, all sorts of things. It really depends on what you want to teach and how you want to tie it in. We've had one being locked in a professor's lab and all these fail-safe mechanisms going off that you need to decode before the lab goes into self-destruct mode. One thing that we do is we make the storyline progressive. So in each envelope that you rip open, you get a bit more of the storyline that it might reveal some clues for you or tell you what's next and tell you what's actually happening. Now at the moment, we mostly write these storylines, but they certainly could be videos. They could be 360-degree videos where you're using AR or VR or things like that. You're being able to look around a room. All of that's possible, and that's up to your imagination and capabilities and things like that. They're very easy to do in a pictorial or written form, though. It's also useful to think about how we actually write our puzzles, and we'll look at a whole lot of different types of puzzles in a moment. But one thing is important, that there's one correct solution for the puzzles, not multiple solutions. And in the way we've done it, just because we've got a numeric keypad, your solutions must result in a numerical answer. Now, if they're not, don't worry, we'll come across it in a few slides' time about how to convert something that's not numerical into something that's numerical so that you can still use it with this sort of device. Now, talking about numbers, it goes beyond just knowing what the numbers are. We also need to know the order of the numbers. And so the participants have to somehow work out, and it needs to be logically worked out, what the order of the numbers needs to be that they need to insert into there. And we've mentioned before, we put each puzzle in a sealed envelope, and you see examples of these above. We just clearly label them 1, 2, 3, and so on. Now, here's a few of the types of puzzles that we've used in the past. Things like waveforms here, that you need to decode the value from the waveform and compare it to an ASCII table. We've got different number bases, so binary and hex and decimal. We've got one in the middle there that the students actually need to use a multimeter for, and it's a little circuit that you can't see the inside of, but you need to work out what's connected to what, for example. Things like logic tables over there that you might use in physics or in teaching electronics, working out from that lookup table what elements need to go where to fit up with a certain logic table. And using those 7-segment displays, the sort of things that you might find in an alarm clock or something. We've used those in a number of different escape room scenarios as well. Now, this goes into many, many different areas. Certainly in STEM, chemistry ones, physics ones, lots of maths examples, but you can do it even beyond there. So we wrote one which is a geography one where people need to decode different place names in Australia and work out the distances between them. We've got above there some safety ones where we're doing safety audits and making sure people can spot hazards in an environment. We've used all sorts of different codes like Caesar ciphers. We've got that one, the Pigpen code that's just there that you can use to decode different values and work out what they are. Just using some logical thinking and teamwork, you can actually decode those rather quickly, but actually thinking through the processes there and putting them in the correct order is a lot of fun, but it also gets students thinking quite deeply as well. So, what target audience are we aiming this at? Well, we've used them with people that are 5 years old up to 85 years old. And we've got really good feedback from pretty well all across those different ages. A couple of things that you need to consider, that the participants really do need to be able to read. And so we had some exceptional 5-year-olds, and the puzzles are obviously adjusted. They were mainly visual in those particular ones. They also need to communicate with each other somehow. And so that could be via Zoom or something with online ones, but it's much better if they can talk around the table. And typically what we do is we have a room full of tables, and each group clumps around a table where they've got their 3 to 5 people and solve the puzzle together and talk through all the different solutions together. They'll also need some paper and pens and things to start scribbling down solutions to each of these things. Now, here's a question we get a lot. What about the numbers aspect of it? We don't use numbers in our discipline. Now, within the STAV disciplines, we actually do use numbers quite a bit. But there's lots of ways you can map something that's not necessarily completely numerical to something that is a lot more numerical. So here's a bunch of them. It could be numbers directly. You could use some Roman numerals or something like that to spell something out. You could somehow spell out those numbers using something like an ASCII table or something like that, where you actually spell out the numbers as O1E or something, for example. You could use a lookup table like the one above. Now, that's a logic gate lookup table, but that lookup table could be something associated with a periodic table of elements, for example. It could be something associated with a whole lot of gears that the students are presented with, and they need to choose the correct gears, and each of those gears are labelled. It could be associated with a whole lot of different types of animals or something like that, or different footprints, or the sky's the limit in what you can add into your lookup table there. You can have some sort of a code where it uses something a bit akin to a Caesar cipher, and where numbers are associated with letters, and each number equals a different letter. You could also have numbers associated with patterns or shapes or sounds or colours or any of those sort of things. There's a whole lot of different scope there for creating numbers in a way that's not necessarily directly numerical. Well, we've done a whole lot of learning evaluation with this, and we've published a bunch of papers. I'll show you a list later on, looking at what the learner performance is and how they receive these sort of things. Now, we've run focus groups both with academics and with over 1,000 students, ranging from high school level to tertiary level. And the things that stand out really quickly is they love the activity, they love the fun aspect of the activity where they're highly engaged in the activity. In fact, we've never seen students that engaged, except maybe in exams, but as I'm sure you imagine as well as I do, that students don't really like exams, but they actually like these escape room-based activities. Now, we get students telling us things like they love the practical confirmation of their knowledge, and sometimes students trick themselves in things like exam revision, where they look at a question and they're like, they look at the answer and then they say like, oh yeah, I know that. Whereas this sort of activity actually doesn't give them the option to just flick to the back of the book and check the answer. Here they need to actually solve it, and they work out whether they do know that or not. And so it's that practical confirmation that they know what they think they knew, or didn't know what they think they knew, for that matter. One thing that we were surprised by is lots of students, 99% of the students we surveyed wanted this as an assessed activity. And so inside of the classes that we teach, each escape room is worth 5% of the subject. So not very much, but a small amount that really motivates them to join it. And once they've joined it, well, then they really get involved in it. We use it at open day at the university, and we had on the one day over 150 takers doing this, which is the most we've ever had for any of our activities in the last few years. And it's interesting because we ran surveys with these groups, and the sort of responses that we get is they seem to be entering into the flow of the activity. They're losing track of time, losing track of awareness of where they are. And these sort of things are really powerful because open day is a noisy, busy activity with lots of hustle and bustle. There's robots driving around, all these sort of things. And yet they're so focused on this activity, which is what we want them to do in the classroom, focusing their energy and attention on trying to solve this activity. They were doing it there. So really great example of how it's been used in practice. Well, there's a bunch of papers here that we've published recently. There's a bunch more because this is a really new area of research. All the papers you'll find in this are about from 2017 onwards in escape room-based learning. So something very new. And given that it's quite new, we thought we'd give you a few opportunities to try out some for yourselves. So these are some online ones. If you have a look over here, one's a STEM-based one, so it's all around using STEM concepts. And it might be one that you actually want to use with your students. It's aimed at the lower to middle secondary level. There's nothing too hard in there, but get some thinking. The other one, we call it the Aussie Escape Room, that we use with a lot of our international students coming in and help familiarise them with some of the concepts around Australia in terms of geography, in terms of language and things like that. Well, where do we go from here? Well, hopefully you've caught the vision of how exciting educational escape rooms can be. First step is to actually try some out and see what they're like. You might want to order one of our boxes or some of our boxes. We have class sets there as well. We have also a little freebie that you can have. So we have a number of the second generation boxes. If you want one, we're happy to offer one completely free, one to each school. So if you just drop me an email there and request one, we'll just post one out to you and you can keep it and play with it to your heart's content. But then it really comes down to actually writing your own escape rooms and seeing the magic turn on in the classroom as students are engaged in this inescapable form of learning. One of the complaints that we get from students a lot is, can't we have more of these? We want them in all our subjects. And as much as I'd love to see that happen, well, it's a fair bit of work doing that. But this is a really special way of learning and something the students really engage strongly with. So hopefully we'll see educational escape rooms coming to a classroom near you very soon. Thanks for listening.